welcome. I'm Tafarra Gadamu. The Nile continues to be the subject of a series of debates across many lines. My guest today, Seifulaziz Milas, in his book Sharing the Nile, Egypt, Ethiopia and the Geopolitics of Water, argues there is only one way out: cooperation and not war. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We seem to be constantly talking about equitable distribution of water. Don't you think this is a question that's out of place?
I think it is a very important question. I mean, you have 10 or 11 countries sharing the Nile, but one country wants to claim rights to all of it. What about the others? They also need Nile waters.
But there is plenty of water out there. Do you agree?
Yes. The Blue Nile provides about 86 billion cubic meters per year to the Nile Basin countries. And the White Nile, starting from Burundi, produces a significant amount also. There is plenty of water for everyone's legitimate needs if they want to share it equitably, and take account of what each other's needs are.
But when you say equitable, I'm sure you're not the first one to say that as far as the Nile is concerned. What does it exactly mean? What does it involve?
Well, it means taking a fair share according to your needs and the needs of others.
But my question is, how do you determine the needs of every country that is in the Nile Basin?
It's hard to do it exactly. Of course, some countries do need more than others. Egypt, for example, needs more than, say, Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, South Sudan, or Sudan for that matter.
Isn't that at the heart of the problem, though?
At the heart of the problem is that Egypt has decided that it has the right to all of the water, and the others cannot accept that.
Each country has not identified how much water it needs. The discussion has barely started.
Yes.
In such a situation, then, you just cannot claim that one country wants all of the water, i.e. Egypt.
That is the basis of the problem, because Egypt claims to have a right to all of the water. And the basis of this, they say that from time immemorial, Egypt's existence has been based on the Nile. That's all very nice, but doesn't provide a basis for denying to others the right to use the Nile. Egypt also claims to have a legal right to all the Nile waters, but the basis for that are very flimsy, based on a 1929 treaty between the British rulers of Egypt at the time and the British rulers of the colonies upstream.
You mean Uganda, Tanganyika, and so on?
But as it happens, the moment the colonial rulers left, those countries all claim to have a right to the Nile waters, originating in or passing through their countries. Now, when Tanganyika became independent, one of the first actions of the president of Tanganyika Julius Nyerere was to inform the Egyptians that Tanganyika did not accept the British Treaty of 1929 as relevant to itself. And they gave the Egyptian government a 2-year period of grace during which it could negotiate the terms of the treaty with Tanganyika.
And that didn't happen.
It didn't happen. And Kenya and Uganda became independent. They took the same course. The Egyptians did not want to talk. So from the point of view of the other Nile Basin countries, the 1929 treaty is just a treaty between the British and the British colonies. Then in 1959, the Egyptians tried another play. They made a treaty with Sudan to share the full flow of the Nile between Egypt and Sudan. 75% for Egypt and 25% for Sudan. Ethiopia, when they began the negotiations for that treaty, Ethiopia informed them that they have not been consulted and will not recognize any bilateral treaty dividing the full waters of the Nile.
But they didn't make either Ethiopia or the other countries that you mentioned were former colonized by Great Britain, didn't push the agenda forward other than saying that we don't recognize the treaties that have been made before us.
Yes.
And the issues continued dragging, and there was no solution in sight. We were talking about things that happened that surfaced late 1950s.
But you'll find that the Egyptians still talk about the 1929 treaty giving them a right to the Nile, and the 1959 treaty as giving them a right, along with Sudan, to all of the Nile waters, which of course is unacceptable.
It's unacceptable, but the upper riparian countries did not meaningfully engage the Egyptians to kind of reverse the course, did they? They didn't.
No, beyond informing them that they don't recognize it.
Do you think that was enough?
Not enough.
It wasn't enough.
I think it was enough. That requires the Egyptians and the Sudanese to provide answers.
Did they provide answers? They didn't.
I know.
So doesn't that point to the fact that there was no meaningful engagement between the lower and upper riparian countries over the last 50 years?
Well, yes, not meaningful because of Egyptian refusal to recognize any rights of the other riparian countries. They could only say, as for our part, we don't accept your treaty as applicable to us, the bilateral treaty. You can divide the water which reach your two countries as you like, but we retain the right to keep and use what flows through our countries.
So, but years later you have the Nile Basin Initiative, which was launched in 1999.
Yes.
Much later.
Yes.
But even then, the initiative also engaged the Egyptians and the Sudanese.
Yes.
But nothing happened for at least 10 years.
Yes, because obstructionism. The Sudanese and the Egyptians were not interested in finding a solution. Only the upstream countries were. That was only when the World Bank suggested the Nile Basin Initiative that they began to move forward. You see, the Nile Basin Initiative grew out of a proposal by the World Bank to look for solutions to the Nile problem. That led eventually to further discussions among the Nile Basin countries, including Egypt and Sudan. But Egypt and Sudan were not very interested in promoting the purposes of the Nile Basin Initiative. And the Nile Basin Initiative, however, eventually resulted in various moves by the Upper Basin states to develop a modus operandi.
And you're talking about the framework agreement that they developed, they eventually started signing.
Yes, that was stalled for a long time by Egypt and Sudan. It's only when the upstream countries decided that enough is enough, we have to move forward on this thing. That's when meetings were held, and several meetings, in fact. And eventually, when these meetings were undermined by Egypt, there was a meeting in which the upstream countries decided, okay, this is enough. We will make our own comprehensive framework agreement.
We will move forward with or without you. That's so.
Yes, exactly.
What was the impact of we know what happened later. Did that consider its needs and its fears and its frustrations?
Yes, that was more or less their feeling. But they had been given every opportunity to express themselves and to join the framework agreement.
But then the discussion continues.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be any solid consensus between the upper and the lower riparian countries. There is still a big question mark out there. And that aside, for example, Ethiopia has embarked on massive development of its waters, i.e. in generating energy. We're talking about Annabella's project, we're talking about Takase, and we're talking about the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
Yes.
And the Egyptians' claim was done without consultation, and that has even triggered fear and uncertainty as far as cooperation is concerned. Is that valid?
No, it's not valid because they had the opportunity for consultation, but they refused or avoided. It was only after a great deal of discussion that the Egyptians...
Was it a discussion, or they had to accept the reality and live with it?
Well, they have been forced to live with the reality. But so far, they have refused to sign the comprehensive framework agreement. But it had moved ahead without them.
But don't they have a valid fear, if you will, because what their argument is that it is going to tamper with the natural flow of the river Nile. Isn't that a legitimate concern?
Not really legitimate concern, because sharing the water will mean interfering with the flow of the dam. What complaining about was that what they're complaining about was really a non-issue. I mean, to build the dam, you have to divert by a small amount the flow, which will eventually go back to its former channel.
If each country if the majority of the riparian countries, I'm talking about the upper riparian countries, as it seems, are coming together and forging ahead, if that continues, wouldn't it be a source of conflict with the lower riparian countries?
No, because only if the Egyptians try to use that to create insecurity.
Do you think war is simply a myth?
I think it is a myth. It's something that none of the countries could afford, each for its own reasons, and especially Egypt. For Egypt, it would be a matter of conflict with Ethiopia, and such a conflict has been tried before and failed. When it was tried before in the 19th century, things were a bit different. Egypt tried to establish control of parts of Ethiopia, and of course they failed.
Well, that's then. We're talking about now.
Yes, about now.
I mean, not necessarily the war, the conventional war that we know of today, but war by other means.
Oh, yes.
You talk in your book about how when Ethiopia wanted to build some of the dams, the Egyptians influenced the international financial institutions.
Yes.
Wouldn't the Egyptians, for example, redouble their efforts to do that in the years ahead? Isn't that possible?
I think the Egyptians may have seen by now that was very difficult. The IFIs were dissuaded from financing it, but financing could still be found.
So what do you think is the way forward? I mean, as you try to elaborate in your book, the population in the sub-region is going to grow by 50% in the next 10 plus years.
Yes.
People are finding it increasingly hard to kind of sustain their lives, sustain themselves. There is always a fight over diminishing resources.
The way forward is cooperation, especially between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan.
Where will that cooperation focus on, you think?
One aspect of it, power production. All three countries have a big shortage of power. All three countries cannot continue to support the populations by subsistence agriculture. So they have to think of industrialization, which needs power. And affordable power. For Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan, affordable power means developing the power energy potential of the Nile. In Egypt, at present, the average farm cultivates about 2 fedans of land.
2 fedans?
Yeah, that's about 1 hectare. And it's enough to keep them going, but not enough to develop economically. The only way out for Egypt is industrialization. The only way out for Ethiopia is industrialization. They need to develop their energy resources, which are mainly in Ethiopia, and use those resources for affordable energy for industrialization. And they need to do it soon.
If not?
If not, poverty is increasing.
And you also talk about in your book that it's not so much about the quantity of water, but the quality of management.
Yes.
Will you elaborate a little bit on that?
Take Egypt, for example. A very large part of the water flowing into Egypt is wasted. You have things like the Toshka scheme, irrigating the western desert. But if you look at the Toshka scheme now, it's not really provided all that much of additional economic earning.
Well, Seifulaziz Milas, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on my show. It was a pleasure indeed.
My pleasure.